Hey everybody, welcome to our LinkedIn live show Going Custom. My name is Kathy Yuen. I am the owner of Phase One Design, and today I have two of my extremely smart colleagues here with me, Colin Showalter and Nick Petrie. We today are going to be talking about setting realistic expectations when you are designing and building a custom home, which is a topic people don't really talk about, but we think it is crucially important for the success of your project. So we're excited to dive in. There's just a few housekeeping items before we get started. If any of you guys have questions, please feel free to drop them in our chat during the show, and we're always happy to answer them. If you're too shy and don't want to ask a question in front of everybody live, feel free to private message either myself, Nick, or Colin. We always love hearing from our audience. And lastly, if you're watching today and have this like burning desire to hear about a topic, or even if it's not that much of a burning desire, any desire for another topic, feel free to also drop that in our chat. We love suggestions. So let's dive right in. So hi, Colin. Hi, Nick. How's it going?
Hey, how's it going?
Good, Kathy. Yourself?
It's nice. Good. Amazing.
Great topic. Lots of notes here for discussion. So excited.
I know, right? I guess like to kind of kick us off, I always feel like, in the world of design, build, construction, everybody always hears the horror stories. And, you guys, I think around the table, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm going to date all of us here. I think each of us individually have, 20 plus years of experience in the industry. I've been running for Phase One for, almost 20 years now with an amazing team. But one thing I will say is anytime something ever goes wrong, I think you can always trace and anything go wrong in construction, like not with our projects, but just in general, you can always kind of trace it back to where like there wasn't a proper expectation set in terms of like communication or whatever. So that's why we think this is such an important topic for anyone who is looking to build a custom home, because we want your project to be successful and not fall into that trap.
Definitely agreed. Realistic expectations is one of the most critical things, whether it's permitting times, construction times, design, engineering response times. Like there are so many different points there.
For sure. Yeah, so maybe there's so many expectations to set at the beginning of the project. I was wondering if maybe we just talk about it. Like to me, it's kind of like three key things. So when you're embarking on a custom design and build, there's kind of like three major things we always look at as a team. So it's expectations with regards to timelines, expectations with regards to budget. So whether it's the design budget or the construction budget, and then expectations with regard to scope, like who's supposed to be doing what and what is the scope, like what is the project. So maybe we can use that as a framework today. What do you guys think?
Totally. Kathy, under timelines and schedules and whatnot, I had like the importance of setting realistic expectations really is like the topic for the show. But from my experience, as you said, over 20 years, most delays, they stem from overly optimistic estimates from the beginning, right?
Yeah.
And, so like the thing is with a custom home, there's always so much emotion involved because you're dreaming about this, right? And you're excited for it and you're spending a lot of money on it. So there's always this psychological sense to like, I want to get that done as soon as possible, right?
Totally. Yeah.
And so overly optimistic timelines is something I had as an important part of the first step.
Yeah, for sure. And you know what? Like, I feel like this is my opinion. I think when you are designing a custom home, you should be excited. Like, it is an exciting process. And if you're working with the right team and the right people, it should be an exciting process, and it will be an exciting process. But, I'll just share some of my experiences in terms of, because between the three of us, we talk to a lot of clients that are like, oh, I want to design and build a custom home. Now what, right? So my experience has been that, okay, I'm a total realist. Like I've been there, done that so many times. I just don't even want to I just want to be real about everything. So instead of telling the client what they want to hear in terms of time frame, it's like, okay, here's actually what's real. And based on that real time frame, you can then kind of plan your life around that rather than telling what they want to hear now and then disappoint them later. But I feel like, and I don't know why there's information or where they're getting this information from, but I will say that very often a client will come in and have this preconceived notion of a time frame that's totally unrealistic. And they're like, no, like I heard this through all these different people and all these different sources. And in the back of my head, I'm like, I don't know where you heard that from, but that is not realistic and that's not achievable. Or like you say, Colin, setting them up for failure really before.
I mean, I had it as common pitfalls as well, right? And it's so, if you use COVID as an example, right? And all the materials were delayed or, you don't have real expectations on any of those kind of things. Well, all of that can impact you negatively. I mean, obviously we don't have COVID challenges on materials, but in general, it's about planning, right? And it's about giving yourself extra time and all those kind of things. So
for sure. Yeah. And I think, one good way to look at it is because there's so many timelines that are unpredictable and out of everyone's hands. And that can vary based on factors that you may or may not even know walking into it. So, as professionals, we can always do our best to say, okay, this is what we anticipate. But what I always like to say to clients is, okay, well, best case scenario, this is what it is. Worst case scenario, this is what it could look like. But then making sure you hear what that worst case scenario is and also plan around that. Because I
was just going to say exactly what you were saying, Kathy, is it's my next thing is it doesn't matter if it's timeline or budget or whatever it is. If you say if the contractor says we're going to be, 2 to 6 weeks to get this completed, the only thing anyone ever hears is 2, right? Totally. And that is definitely a common pitfall because if you're not planning for 6 and you're expecting 2, you're set up for failure. Right off.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's
it's it's exponential, right? Because, your window guy, your flooring guy, your this, they are all going to give you a range. And to be completely blunt, if someone says it will be there, in 10 days exactly, that's just not realistic, right? The ranges are the only way these guys can accurately predict. Yeah. So I think it's just a matter of understanding that the best case scenario doesn't always happen and you have to also prepare for the worst. So
for sure. Yeah. The other thing I want to add too is, I think oftentimes a lot of our clients, they're referred to us by, their friends and family and colleagues that have also worked with us. So, but oftentimes, we'll get a comment like, oh, well, my friend did their project in X amount of months or years or whatever that timeline is. Yeah. But then what I think is really important to realize as a homeowner going into your own project is that every project is going to be different. So it's different land. It may or may not be a different approval process. It's a totally different house with its own different nuances. So all these little micro factors add up very quickly and can influence and skew the time frame from, your friend's project or what you read online or whatever. Every project is so different.
Yeah. And that was related to that. Like you said, every project is different. Whether it's a renovation, new build, how large is the new build, which municipality, what their side rules are. Did they order cabinets from a local supplier who has a guarantee, or did they order it from overseas and then it has to be shipped in and then you don't know what the delays are going to be? Is there delays at the Port Authority when it's coming? There's so many things, right, that can affect it. So yeah, really.
I wrote down here 3 actionable tips that I can provide to kind of avoid, these sort of pitfalls. So the first one I had was the how, starting by identifying major milestones in the project, right? So that you actually know, did you hit those major milestones? I don't think you can look at those type of projects as on a day-to-day basis because you could be 2 days behind on Tuesday and 5 days ahead by Friday, right? So
totally. Yeah.
you have to really measure what the major milestones are and kind of work backwards to set those realistic expectations, right? The second one I had was the who, which is like speaking to the contractor, speaking to the supplier, speaking to the buildings project manager, and understanding those ranges we just talked about and how they overlap. You know what I mean? Like imagine having a cabinet contractor on site and he give you a 2-week window, but cabinets don't show up till next week, So those are kind of important. And also like when is my third item. And it's just simple as the earlier you start any of these conversations gives you more time to have them and ensure they're correct. So
no, I completely agree. They working in especially early conversations with your millwork, with your engineers, you can actually work out what the dependent items are that are going to push your timeline out, because like you said, countertops can't go in until the cabinets are there, and like tile can't go on until there's so many things that they're all cascading.
They're all connected. Yeah.
There's some questions that I put on here, like to ask your builder when you're like shopping for a builder. We talked about last week or the week before. Is your builder accounting for all these external factors, things like weather, things like shipping delays, things like permitting processes? We've all seen the city just be nightmares lately. Maybe it's getting inspections. Has the city or the builder that's going to be executing this considered all those things? I think that's a huge question for you to ask your builder. And then the other things is that have they started clarifying and detailing deadlines with all the stakeholders involved, whether it's suppliers, engineers, contractors, whatever it is. So those are questions I would want to ask my builder.
Yeah. I think too, and just to kind of build upon that, Colin, I think those are also really good questions to ask the design firm. I think that's actually something that's very commonly missed. Like obviously your designer should be able to design beautiful homes, but then also there's a whole project management side to design on the back end that talks about schedule, right? So like, and we try to kind of insulate our clients from having to deal with all those details because they're kind of boring and most clients don't really care, to be honest. So, coordinating all the consultants on the back end, coordinating with the cities, all that. How do all those different pieces fit together? So as an example, I can speak to what we do in our firm. We actually have a Gantt chart. I won't get into what that is. If you don't know what it is, you can Google it. It's like GANTT. It's basically a schedule that shows every single thing that needs to happen within a project and the time frame associated with it. And there's ways when you actually put together these Gantt charts that you can build in contingencies and like lead times and lag times and all that kind of stuff. So it can get pretty complex and sophisticated, but really the message is, just sharing some more tips is just to make sure whoever you're working with is organized in that way on the back end to make sure that you do have that realistic schedule and building all those unknowns into the schedule.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. So I guess that was a great conversation about realistic timeline expectations. Why don't we look at the next one? This is like everybody's always favorite topic is like, how much does my house cost and budget? So how does a homeowner set realistic expectations around budgets, whether it's a design budget or a construction budget or both?
Well, I took about this like Kathy looking at it backwards. So the question that I asked was, why does the cost often exceed expectations? And what it is that there's often anticipated expenses, things like, maybe permit fees, holding costs, material price fluctuations, or labor price fluctuations, right? And maybe even in budgeting, the builder will overlook details in their initial budget, maybe things like you didn't consider taxes or shipping or, those kind of things. So really, it's no different with budget than it is with timeline, is that you have to have some sort of contingency in there or you're set up to be always on that stressful point of view, right? So,
well, just as an addendum to that, though, you also have to be careful as to where you're getting your baseline from. A lot of people are looking at HGTV and any of those shows. Those shows, may have been filmed 6 years ago. They also might be in the United States or anywhere else. And I'm tending to find that they're all inaccurate, like very inaccurate. Like I'm hearing $200, $250 a square foot to build. I'm like, sorry, which country?
Yeah. We still love you, but yeah, it just depends on where you are, right?
Yeah, well, no, and it's just, I understand, but if you're
Totally.
talking in Calgary, if you're talking in Vancouver, you're talking in most of Canada, those prices don't work, right? And they're completely out of date. So that's another thing to factor in is, are you checking with 3 or 4 local builders that look at their projects, look to be about the quality level that you're looking for? Use that as your baseline. Have an initial conversation, even if it's just a quick one.
Not even just multiple builders, Nick, is what I had written down here is one of my actionable tips was who, right? And so what that means to me is consult multiple professionals. You want to talk to the contractors. You want to maybe talk to architects. Maybe you're going to talk to the financial advisors, your mortgage brokers, those kind of things. And, when we talked about ranges earlier, they're all going to have different perspectives and different views on the same thing, but you're hoping that the range is still within the range, even from each perspective, right? So I think that's a way to get some certainty there too.
Yeah, for sure. I think too, there's a lot of, different ways you can do budgeting. So let's just say, if you go to any one of those people in your circle and you say, how much is this house going to cost? And they're going to give you like one number, let's just say, or, very common, it's like cost per square foot. But then I always say, like, the more important question is what's included in that number? Because on a construction budget, on a construction project, yes, you have the construction of the actual house, but even leading up to that, there's things like design, permits. You have to take down the old house if there is that there. And in doing so, you need asbestos abatement, hazardous materials.
Or even landscaping after the fact. Everything. Lots of people don't have landscaping in their budgets and stuff, right?
So I think that's, sorry.
Go ahead. No, I was going to say, like, hooking up to city services and everything else.
There's a long list.
Yeah, like there's the construction of the actual house, but all the things that connect to it, and like you said, the land around it, like there's so many things that have to be factored in.
For sure. Yeah. So I think the better question to ask, the better way to ask that question is to say, okay, what is my total budget that I need all in turnkey? And being clear on those things that are included. And like we listed quite a few things already, but like the list is very long. I mean, we won't get into that today, but like, if anyone's curious, I mean, obviously just reach out to us. But yeah, like before construction and then even after the construction and building, like landscaping, and even like, okay, so what about your furniture budget? I know like probably no one's thinking about furniture until like after the house is built, but like there's a price tag attached with that too. Or if you want, you could just use your old furniture. That's an option too. Whatever it is, there's no right or wrong. It's just, making sure it's fully accounted for in your budget.
Yep.
And then, so I guess with regards to that, like, what are some other ways to set a realistic expectation of budget?
Well, and different people do different things. Like there are people that build full spreadsheets to track every aspect, performance, otherwise, and that's good. I mean, you should, in one sense, be tabulating that, but you should like. The easiest way is just to do the high level stuff and like what is design. Yeah.
That just made me think of something. So here's another thing that I think is important for every homeowner to know walking into this process and to set a very realistic expectation. Okay. So when you're going through this exercise that we just talked about asking, your network, let's say, in terms of like, how much is my house going to cost? I will say nobody is going to be able to give you a 100% accurate answer.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because they are making so many assumptions. The only way to get a 100% accurate estimate is when you have a full set of architectural design plans and when you have a full set of interior design specifications. And at that point, you're already spending, quite a bit of money. Like, I mean, I would say close to $100,000 on a custom home to get to that point, right? Yep. So obviously you don't want to spend all that money just to get that answer. So, it's kind of like you want to start high level here and then narrow it down. So like the high level up here is like, what is my low and my high range budget range that I should expect? And if that's something that you are comfortable with, then yes, okay, let's kind of like dial it in. Maybe you spend a bit of money on design, like just a preliminary design, and then you're going to be able to get a more certain number, like your number range is going to tighten up. And then the further on you get kind of down that funnel, like at some point you're going to have that full set of details and drawings and specifications where you're going to be able to go out to the trades and get like an actual accurate number.
Yeah. Well, Kathy, it's a perfect segue in a lot of ways, right? Because what you just described is the scope of the project. right?
Mhm.
So until you fully define the scope of the project, you will not be able to fully define the price of the project, right? So
Totally.
as scope changes or has variability within it, or things have not been decided upon yet, there's still a bigger range on the price because the scope is still somewhat loose, right? And
Totally.
so the next major step we were going to talk about today is the actual scope of the project. And you know what, really, like I said, the segue is that scope ultimately is going to determine budget, and it's going to determine timeline. So scope ultimately is very important.
Yep.
Definitely. And yeah, maybe we can touch on that because I think, you know, speaking just from my personal experiences where sometimes there, you know, and I will say even oftentimes, I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I just did a design meeting of the very, very first initial design meeting. And the client walked in to this meeting and we already had the information in advance in terms of like the site, everything like that. So our team went through and did an analysis of that. And the client said, okay, I want X amount of square footage in my house, and then here's all the rooms that I want in my house. And here's my budget. And so it turns out that, you know, the three didn't line up. So basically they wanted way too many rooms for the square footage, and the square footage was driving the budget. So what I said to them was, okay, well, you know what? What's the most important thing to you? Is it getting all those rooms? Is it staying on budget or staying within square footage, which is kind of like the same thing? And their response was, our biggest thing is going to be our budget. So the answer isn't, no, you can't have all these rooms. You kind of have to, there's other creative ways to get what you want. And I'll give you an example following the same example. So what I said to them was, it was an office. They wanted, you know, all these different things. And then on the main floor also, they wanted an office. But I was like, well, that actually just doesn't fit on the site. It doesn't fit on the budget. You're going to be adding, you know, another couple hundred square feet for what you want for this office. But here's what we can do. We can actually do like an office space or an office use somewhere else in the house. So we were still able to tick off that checkbox of like what they wanted that space for, but without sacrificing budget or without sacrificing the square footage. So my point is like there's creative ways to modify the scope if we need to. Like it doesn't necessarily mean just throwing everything out the window and not being able to have it, but it's just being able to have those conversations at the beginning. Usually it's with the design team where, you know, we can come in and say, okay, well, here's all the things on your wish list and your scope. You can have all these things, but maybe not these two things, but maybe there's another way we can address them. But doing that really early on.
Totally. Kathy, to add to that, I was just going to say is that like defining scope of how important it is. My note that I had on defining scope was ambiguities in scope are always going to lead to scope creep, which is going to increase time and cost unexpectedly throughout the whole project. So having like, you know, when you look at your design for your project, that is literally your instruction manual for the builder. So if it's incomplete, that is the definition of ambiguities. And so that's a very important part is clearly defining scope.
100%. Yeah.
That's very true. I've seen it in too many projects where I think we might do this, where you might do that. You end up designing all of it, and then you start actually getting the price and everything else, and it's way out of what you were expecting. And even though we advised in the beginning, like this will most likely be $20,000 for this, but like if you know what I'm getting at, you give all that.
Sure. Yeah, and you guys both bring up really good points. And I will say, like, this is kind of where I think a lot of clients get overwhelmed. They're like, oh, well, like I want all this stuff and here's my budget. And like, how do I put this all together? This is not something, just to be clear, that like you as a homeowner should be doing. As a matter of fact, we highly encourage everybody to come to us with just everything, like lay it out all on the table. And like, that's what we as professionals do. Like we can take a look at this and very quickly we can analyze and say, okay, well, this is realistic, this is not realistic, help you prioritize, and then help you get to like a spot that, you know, the three things align with like your scope, your budget, your timeline, like all that. The scope too, I will say, you know, we should maybe touch upon that because Colin, you talked about like clearly defining the scope. So that is not like an overnight process.
No, I have some actionable items listed here too, Kathy, if you want me to go through those
please.
In order to keep scope. So, you know, the actionable items, as far as the how goes, I said basically define the scope in writing, drawing, whatever it is, detail, inclusions, exclusions, everything, and share that with all the stakeholders involved, you know, contractors, suppliers, everything. And also, like, you know, something we take for granted in-house in our world, but, you know, reviewing the third-party drawings and stuff like that to make sure that there's a cohesive scope, you know, that the window drawings and the floor truss drawings match the architectural drawings and those kind of things, right? So I think that's part of it. And then, you know, who we've talked about a lot on all these aspects, because really it's the stakeholders that are, you know, the who all the time, right? Work closely with the contractors, the designers, you know, to make sure we align the project boundaries. There's a budget, and then there's like, you know, it's the same thing with budget, right? Is it like, we don't want to spend $1 more than this. So like, what are the actionable items we can do to make sure that we can still get the scope you're looking for within the budget, right? So, and then, you know, make sure that the scope is clear and revisited as it evolves, because as we all know, design starts in one place and ends in another place at times. So to avoid scope creep, I think that it's important to have budget conversations on a regular conversation so that, you know, we're continuously revisiting that, because every decision you make along the way is going to really impact things. And you know what, from a design point of view, there is always a mathematical trade-off between scope, cost, and timeline. And you know, really, it's our job to kind of balance that.
Yeah, totally. And like, you know, talking about budget regularly, like just to define what that means, like in my opinion, it should be at every design meeting, you know, at least like an acknowledgement of the budget. And again, to set that realistic expectation, design teams are not going to know how much your house is going to cost halfway through a design process. But what we are going to be able to generally advise on are things like, okay, so you just added 200 square feet to your house. You're probably budget-wise X amount of dollars more based on the square footage that you added, right? So like just like broad strokes, kind of like conversations like that, I think is super important. And just to say, hey, like, guys, where are we at? Are we like kind of sort of on the same budget that we started off with, or are we like way up here? Usually it's not like down. Usually people add.
But budgets can evolve too, right? That's exactly what you're saying. Is that the scope evolves, but and it's not necessarily the builder or the designers or any of the shareholders or stakeholders' jobs to tell clients how to spend their money, but it's about educating them about what their decisions and choices cost, right? And if their choices and decisions change, then the cost may change. So I think it's just, we don't want to forget that as decisions go, you want to make sure you're continually reevaluating those kind of things. So
yeah.
100%. I think there was a question, Kathy. Did we want to get back to
that? Yeah, there is. Yeah, Daniel had a question. So what do you think are the biggest delays of the city?
That depends on the city.
Who wants to take that question?
Yeah.
It all depends.
Before you say anything too, I just want to like, okay, everybody kind of poo-poos the city, and you know what, the cities that we work with and the municipalities are our partners, like all day long. They always have been, and they're trying hard. Like I know everybody.
Kathy just noticed that there's a couple logged in and watching, so.
Oh really? Okay. Oh, I actually did not know that. No, like I mean that. I actually do mean that. Like we do have really great relationships with our city. So I just want to like kind of like defend them a little, not defend them, but you know, I just want to put that out there to the world.
I can give a kind of a quick, easy comment is that, you know what, the cities right now, when I look at Calgary, the biggest delays in the city is that they're overwhelmed by volume and inexperience right now, because the volume has required them to restaff. And, you know, so to my quick answer is they're overwhelmed by volume and inexperience.
Yeah.
That is always going to be the case with every city. And so very, very valid. It also depends on a couple of things. One is the experience of the designer that's working on the project and how well they know that city's requirement, and how well that city likes to communicate things, because that can slow down the whole process. But the other thing is how many conditional elements you're asking for versus outright elements. If it says, you know, this requires the director of planning, that's a conditional element, right?
In City of Vancouver.
Well, that's most cities have a clause somewhere in their zoning saying if you want to ask for this, it does require the director of planning.
Yeah, like so just for our friends that are not in Vancouver, kind of like the language is like it's very city specific. So the discretionary aspects of that application versus like the ones that are like 100% permitted. You know, sorry, Nick.
Yeah, no. It's just when you're going through the zoning, there will be certain elements that'll say if you wish to have this,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to require.
What you're really saying, though, Nick, is that you're saying that you have to have whatever jurisdiction you're working in, you have to have a design team that is working through your permits, that understands all the local codes, all the local bylaws. Because if you submit permit or development permits or whatever that have bylaw deficiencies in them, the city throws it back and doesn't even look at it, and it's a back and forth. So that's timeline issue, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's really what you're getting at, is that you want someone that understands that local code wherever it is, so that they're getting it right the first time, not having to adjust as the city throws it back on the learning curve, right? So
Exactly.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, guys. Well, oh my God, 30 minutes goes by so fast. We're like time up.
Thanks, everyone.
First and foremost, I just want to thank all of our viewers for joining us today. Like, our viewership is like exploding right now, which is like amazing. So thank you so much for everyone's support. I want to give a huge shout out to Nick from our team and also Colin from our team. You guys are amazing. I'm so lucky to have you guys as colleagues. If you like the show, make sure to like and subscribe to Going Custom in whatever channel you're watching. Don't forget to invite your friends. And then, of course, if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to connect with any three of us directly. We always love hearing from you guys on questions or even future topics. Lastly, thank you again. So we'll see you guys next week. Bye for now.
Perfect.